The ship groaned, another section collapsing inward. Miller braced himself against a sparking conduit, the metallic tang of blood thick in the recycled air. He had minutes, maybe seconds, to make a choice: leave the Daxamite behind or risk everything. A narrow corridor choked with twisted metal and severed cables had become his tomb, or hers. "Help me." The voice, strained and guttural, echoed from further down the corridor. Daxamite. Miller knew that tone, even though he hadn't heard it in years. He was pinned, a mangled support beam crushing his left leg, but the alien was further in, deeper in the ship's collapsing guts. He cursed, a bitter taste rising in his throat. Save himself. That was the logical choice. The smart choice. Every instinct screamed at him to cut his losses and find a way out. But the Daxamite's cry, it snagged on something buried deep inside him, something he thought he'd purged long ago. With a surge of adrenaline, Miller heaved against the beam. Pain lanced through his leg, white-hot and blinding, but the metal groaned, shifting just enough for him to wriggle free. He stumbled forward, the corridor shaking violently with each new tremor that ran through the dying ship. A flash, faces of his old squad grinning, joking, then nothing, just smoke and screams. He blinked, the memory receding, leaving him cold. Getting attached got you killed. He knew that better than anyone. He found her pinned beneath a heavy console, its flickering lights casting grotesque shadows on her wolf-like face. Her lower body was a mess, legs twisted at unnatural angles, crushed, unusable. Why? She rasped, her golden eyes narrowed with suspicion. Why would a human risk his life for a Daxamite? Another groan, louder this time. A section of the ceiling peeled away, showering them with sparks and debris. He had maybe 30 seconds now. "Don't have time for a history lesson," Miller grunted, assessing the console. It was heavy but not immovable. "Just tell me if you want to live." He braced his feet, ignoring the agony in his leg, and gripped the edge of the console. Muscles screamed as he lifted, the metal protesting with a screech that mirrored Zara's own stifled cry of pain. With a final surge, he heaved the console up a few precious inches, enough for her to drag herself free. He let the console crash back down, the sound swallowed by the ship's death throes. He didn't wait for thanks. He simply scooped her up in a fireman's carry, her lithe but surprisingly heavy body a dead weight in his arms. He struggled to navigate the debris-strewn corridor, each step a battle against gravity and the ship's relentless collapse. A quick image. A battlefield, Daxamite soldiers charging, human soldiers firing, the air thick with hatred and plasma fire. They reached the escape pod bay, or what was left of it. The blast doors were partially sealed, buckled and warped, but there was a gap. The only option. The pod itself was a wreck, panels ripped open, wires sparking, but maybe, just maybe. "The override," Zara gasped, her voice weak but clear. "Sequence Delta 9-4 Alpha, bypass manual controls." Despite her pain, she knew this ship. Knew it well. Miller fought his way to the mangled control panel, his fingers flying over the damaged keys. He entered the sequence, a desperate prayer on his lips. A klaxon blared, deafeningly loud, and the escape pod lurched forward, tearing free of its moorings just as the ship behind them erupted in a blinding explosion. They were adrift in space, the escape pod damaged but functional, a tiny speck of metal against the vast, indifferent canvas of the cosmos. Alive for now, but stranded, and with so many questions unanswered. The hull groaned again, a tortured screech of metal twisting against itself. Miller ran a hand over the escape pod's control panel, the flickering emergency lights casting long, dancing shadows. Damaged hull, life support sputtering, minimal fuel. He glanced at Zara, her large, lupin eyes closed, the rise and fall of her chest shallow. Stable for now. But she needed immediate medical attention he couldn't provide here. He rummaged through the meager supplies, 2 nutrient paste packs, half a recycled water bottle, and a first aid kit containing little more than synth skin and pressure bandages. Oxygen. The gauge flickered ominously. Maybe 24 hours tops. He spotted the distress beacon, its casing cracked, wires exposed. He cursed it under his breath. He wrestled the beacon open, his fingers clumsy in the dim light. A cursory inspection confirmed his fears. The transmitter was fried, a critical crystal component shattered beyond repair. He banged his hand against the console in frustration. Worthless. Miller. Zara's voice, though weak, cut through his despair. The derelict I recognize. Sensor readings. He turned to her, hope flickering. The Relic ship, you know where we are. Approximate location, she rasped, her brow furrowed in concentration. Near, debris field, Daxamite systems, unique signature. Before he could respond, a shrill alarm blared through the escape pod. Miller snapped to the sensors, his hand instinctively reaching for the discarded pulse rifle. Unidentified vessel approaching. No transponder signal. He squinted at the blurry readings. Could be anything, pirates, scavengers, marauders, Zara breathed, her eyes widening. The comm panel crackled to life. A gruff, distorted voice filled the cramped space. Unidentified vessel this is. Salvage claimer Vulture's Claw. Identify yourselves or we will open fire. Miller hesitated. Giving them his name and affiliation was suicide. This is. Transport vessel Drifter, we are experiencing. Engine failure, requesting assistance. He winced at the pathetic lie. Daxamite life sign detected, the voice snarled, bypassing Miller's fabricated story. We know who you have on board. Surrender the Daxamite female immediately. She is of significant interest to us. The word interest dripped with menace. Miller's grip tightened on the pulse rifle. She is under my protection. We require medical assistance. Stand down and we will discuss terms. A subtle shift had occurred within him. He wasn't just protecting a valuable asset, he was protecting her. Zara's voice, though strained, was filled with urgency. Their energy signature. Unstable containment field, modified mining lasers. Overloaded, weak point. Dorsal array exploited. Exploit what? Miller muttered, his eyes darting between the sensor readings and Zara. When they get close, she instructed, divert power. Auxiliary thrusters, short burst. Target dorsal array, overload. Disrupt their shields. The escape pod shuddered violently as a grappling hook slammed against the hull. Red lights flashed. Breaching attempt imminent, the automated voice announced. Brace yourself, Miller growled, activating the escape pod's pathetic excuse for weaponry. 2 forward-facing laser pistols. He fired blindly through the viewport as a breaching charge detonated against the hull, showering the interior with sparks and debris. The pod rocked violently. He managed to repel the initial boarding wave, the Marauder's crude weapons scorching the already damaged hull. But the pod was taking a beating. Alarms blared incessantly. Life support failing, the automated voice announced, its tone flat and emotionless. Oxygen levels, critical. Miller glanced at the oxygen gauge. It was plummeting. They were running out of time. The Relic ship, Zara gasped, her voice barely audible. It carried. Powerful communication array, intergalactic, rain. Miller stared at her, incredulous. A comm array. You're telling me that thing could talk to other galaxies? Damaged, she clarified, but components may still function. Debris field. Section 7, auxiliary transmitter, partially intact. A desperate plan formed in Miller's mind, audacious and unlikely to succeed. We use the escape pod's remaining power. Reroute it to that transmitter. Send a distress signal. Our only chance. He scrambled to the control panel, his fingers flying across the damaged circuits. Rerouting power was a gamble, a dangerous one. It would cripple the life support systems completely, leaving them with minutes of breathable air. But it was their only hope. I need auxiliary power conduit. Override sequence, he muttered, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The oxygen levels continued to drop. The panel sparked violently as he forced a connection. Damn it! Damn it! The escape pod's main door buckled inward with a screech of tortured metal, showering sparks into the cramped space. Two hulking figures in scavenged armor, their faces obscured by crude rebreathers, stormed inside, weapons raised. Miller dove behind an overturned console, the air whistling past his ear as plasma fire sizzled the metal where he'd been moments before. He returned fire, 3 shots from his pulse pistol, each carefully aimed. Ammunition was dwindling fast. "Above you, human," Zara's voice, strained but clear, cut through the din. The armor plating on their right shoulder joined a thermal exhaust port. "Aim for the unshielded vent." Miller risked a glance. Zara, strapped into the damaged acceleration couch, her face pale with pain, was pointing with a trembling clawed hand. He shifted his aim, firing a short burst at the indicated spot. One of the marauders staggered, clutching his shoulder with a guttural roar. The other pressed the attack, forcing Miller back behind the console. Rerouting the power cables to the comm array was proving impossible. The pod systems were failing one by one. He ripped open a panel, a snarl escaping his lips as he saw the tangled mess of wires. Sparks danced across his knuckles as he tore at the insulation, ignoring the searing pain. The acrid smell of burning plastic filled the air. Another plasma blast slammed into the console, sending shrapnel flying. Zara gasped, a sharp intake of breath that was almost a sob. The physical impact of the attack, combined with the stress, was taking its toll. Her paralysis seemed to be worsening, her body rigid with pain. Her breathing was ragged. "Zara, hang on," Miller yelled, his voice tight with desperation. He knew he couldn't protect her and fix the comm array at the same time. He needed a diversion. His eyes scanned the pod, landing on a pile of discarded components. An idea sparked. He grabbed a damaged power cell and a handful of loose wires, working quickly to assemble a makeshift explosive device. It was crude, dangerous, but it might buy them some time. "Brace yourself," he shouted, tossing the device towards the breached doorway. A blinding flash and a concussive blast rocked the pod, momentarily repelling the marauders. Miller seized the opportunity, throwing himself back into the wiring. He managed to connect the final power cable to the damaged communication array, but the power surge was immediate and violent. The array sputtered to life, then began to whine ominously. Red lights flashed across the control panel. A burst of static filled the pod, followed by a garbled voice. Then a clear but fragmented signal cut through the noise. "Daxamite Princess Zara." The transmission abruptly ceased as the power overloaded, plunging the pod back into near darkness. The array went silent, smoke curling from its ruined circuits. Zara stared at him, her multifaceted eyes wide with horror. You said my name," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the hiss of escaping atmosphere. "It was fragmented," Miller said quickly, trying to reassure her. "They probably didn't get the whole message. But they heard enough." Zara's voice rose in panic. "My family, they were disgraced during the war, the Daxamite human war. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Miller paused, his brow furrowed. "War? What are you talking about?" Zara's voice was filled with bitterness. "Humanity and Daxam used to be at war. I thought that was common knowledge. My family was caught trying to broker peace and were accused of treason. Now everyone will know where I am." Miller cursed under his breath. He hadn't known about that. He managed to stabilize the power flow to the array, coaxing it back to a low level of functionality. The oxygen levels continued to drop, the air growing thin and stale. The communication array flickered, displaying a series of rapidly scrolling characters. Then a single line of text emerged, "Crimson Fang vessel approaching." Zara's expression darkened. "The Crimson Fang," she hissed. "They are the ones who captured me. They crippled me, looking to exploit my lineage for their gain." Rage flared in Zara's eyes, a raw, animalistic fury. She strained against the restraints, her paralyzed limbs twitching uncontrollably. "Let me go, human. Let me send a message." "What are you doing?" Miller asked, his voice a warning. "I have to tell them not to come for me. The princess is an enemy of the state." Zara was hysterical. "No," Miller yelled, Reinforcements are our only hope. Not if they know I am the one who sent the message. Zara roared. Miller detected several more ships arriving on the sensors. It was unknown if they received the message or were with the pirates. We don't know who's coming, Miller said, trying to reason with her. But if they know you're a princess, they might get here faster. No, Zara spat, struggling against the restraints. They will kill me. Trust me, Miller said. I don't, Zara screamed. She bucked against the restraints with all her strength, sending tremors through the damaged pod. The lights flickered and a warning klaxon blared. Stop it, Miller yelled, grabbing her shoulders. He hated doing this, but he had no choice. He activated the restraints, tightening them until she was completely immobilized. I'm sorry, Zara, he said, his voice low and sincere. But you have to trust me. We're running out of time. He turned back to the comm array, his eyebrows furrowed with tenacity. He sent out another message, a clear, concise signal pinpointing their location and explicitly identifying Zara as a Daxamite princess. The sensor readings flickered erratically, a chaotic dance of red and yellow warnings across the cracked display. Miller cursed under his breath. Crimson Fang, he growled, the name a bitter taste on his tongue. They're using advanced tracking. This tin won't stay hidden for long. Zara's voice, though weak, carried the sharp edge of command. Flight is futile, human. They know who I am. My capture is inevitable. Better to fight, deny them my knowledge, my lineage. Miller ignored her. In his experience, inevitable was just a fancy word for not trying hard enough. He jabbed a sequence into the console. We're not fighting. We're surviving. This escape pod has enough juice left for one trick, detaching and drifting into that asteroid field. They'll have a hell of a time finding us amongst the rocks. A fool's errand, Zara hissed, her wolf-like muzzle wrinkling in distaste. Maybe, but it's our fool's errand. Miller pounded his fist on a sparking panel. Detachment sequence initiated. Brace yourself, princess. This is going to be bumpy. The entire pod shuddered as Miller bypassed safety protocols, forcing the damaged systems to comply. Warning klaxons blared, a cacophony of impending doom. Each override was a gamble, each spark a potential cascade failure that would leave them dead in the water. Human, Zara interrupted, her voice strained but urgent. While you play mechanic, I have accessed the pod's defense grid, primitive but functional. A holographic display flickered to life, revealing schematics of the pod. There is a hidden laser cannon, but the sensor damage is far worse than you believe. We are effectively blind. Before Miller could respond, a new alarm shrieked, louder and more insistent than the others. Hull breach, the computer screamed. Multiple entry points detected. Damn it, Miller swore. They're boarding, near emergency storage locker 3. He spared a glance at Zara. Cannon's useless without sensors. Stay put. I'll deal with this. He grabbed a plasma rifle from a weapons rack and sprinted towards the emergency storage area. The boarding party was cutting through the hull with thermal charges, molten metal dripping onto the floor. He had seconds. Thinking fast, Miller rerouted power from the pod's life support to a secondary access door, sealing off the breach point. The charging marauders were caught off guard, one of them trapped in the small compartment. A guttural scream echoed from behind the newly sealed door. That bought us some time, Miller said, panting, but it also delayed the pod launch. We're sitting ducks. Not entirely, Zara said, her voice surprisingly calm. The Crimson Fang. They are predictable. They will assume we are attempting escape on a standard trajectory. We will offer them a ghost. A ghost? Miller asked, confused. Use the escape pod's external thrusters. Create a false signal, simulate an escape trajectory. Make them think we are fleeing while we remain attached to the derelict. Miller stared at her, impressed despite himself. Clever. Risky, but clever. He punched in the new commands, activating the thrusters. The escape pod lurched, sending a burst of energy into the void. The Crimson Fang ship hesitated. Miller could see it on the damaged sensors, its movements indecisive. They were buying it, for now. "Detachment sequence," he barked, his fingers flying across the console. Now, the pod finally separated from the derelict ship, drifting silently into the asteroid field. But as they floated free, a deafening explosion rocked the pod. The compartment where Miller had trapped the Marauder had detonated. A jagged hole ripped through the hull, sucking out atmosphere and damaging the pod's control systems. Alarms blared, red lights flashed, oxygen levels plummeted. "We're losing atmosphere," Miller shouted, struggling to maintain his grip. "There," Zara gasped, pointing with a trembling claw towards a section of the damaged wall. "Emergency oxygen locker behind the structural support. Only accessible physically." Miller stared at the narrow opening, barely wide enough to squeeze through. He was already feeling the effects of oxygen deprivation, his vision blurring, his movements sluggish. He had to get to that locker, for Zara, for himself. He took a deep breath and plunged into the gap, scraping his armor against the jagged metal. Pain lanced through his arm as he squeezed through the opening. He reached the locker, his fingers fumbling with the release mechanism. Finally, the hatch popped open. He grabbed the oxygen mask and stumbled back to Zara, collapsing beside her. He jammed the mask over her muzzle, watching as her chest rose and fell with renewed vigor. "Thank you, human," Zara breathed, her voice regaining strength. "But the supply is limited enough for a short time only." She paused, her gaze hardening. "There is a long-range beacon. It can be jury-rigged to send a distress signal. It may reach someone friendly, or it may draw pirates. We have no way of knowing." Miller stared at the beacon. "Then we send it now." "No," Zara countered, her voice firm. "We send it only when we have no other options. Once sent, there is no turning back. The choice is irreversible." "We can't just sit here and wait to die, Zara," Miller said, his voice strained. "We send the distress signal now." Zara shifted, her paralyzed form unable to fully express her agitation. "And attract what, Miller? Scavengers? Council patrols? Do you have any idea who might be listening?" "I don't care," Miller snapped. "Anything is better than drifting until the air runs out. We send the signal." He reached for the activation switch. Zara's voice was sharp. "Wait," I said, "wait." She paused, her expression softening slightly. "All right, delay it. A short time, but prepare it. I want to see what you're doing." Miller exhaled, reluctantly pulling his hand back. "Fine. A little longer staring at space rocks it is." He turned to the escape pod's console, the flickering emergency lights casting long shadows across his face. As if to punctuate his words, the pod lurched violently. A high-pitched screech of metal echoed through the cramped space. "Asteroid impact," Zara stated grimly. "Minor, but it damaged the navigation system." Miller cursed under his breath, already assessing the damage. "Damn it, navigation's fried. I'll have to reroute power manually." He began manipulating the damaged controls, sparks flying from exposed wires. "There," Zara said, her voice surprisingly calm amidst the chaos. "Divert power from auxiliary life support to the starboard thrusters. That should compensate for the loss of the primary gyros." Her familiarity with the ship systems, even this crude escape pod, was unnerving. Miller grunted, following her instructions. "All right, starboard thrusters are online, but we're still drifting blind through this rock garden. Any bright ideas, Zara?" Zara closed her eyes for a moment, seemingly visualizing the space around them. "There's a cluster of larger asteroids ahead. Chart a course 10 degrees above the ecliptic plane. There should be a narrow channel. Risky, but it's the only way through without further damage." Miller hesitated, then nodded. "Risky is our new normal." He wrestled with the makeshift controls, guiding the escape pod into the asteroid field. Jagged rocks whizzed past, some missing them by mere meters. As Miller focused on navigation, he spared a glance at the distress beacon controls. Frowning, he muttered, "The impact must have rattled the transmitter. Signal strength's pathetic and the location data is scrambled." "Can you fix it?" Zara asked, her voice filled with concern. Miller shook his head. "Not completely, but maybe we can boost the signal. There's a power converter in the life support system that might work as an amplifier. Zara's eyes widened. Are you insane? That would further deplete our already limited resources. We need that life support. And what good is life support if no one knows where we are? Miller countered. It's a risk we have to take. Zara remained silent, her expression a mixture of fear and resignation. Miller set to work, carefully rerouting power from the life support system to the distress beacon amplifier. The pod shuddered as the power drain took its toll. The emergency lights flickered more erratically. The temperature began to drop noticeably. Signal strength is up, Miller announced, his voice tight with concentration. But it's still unstable. The distortion is significant. We're broadcasting a garbled mess with inaccurate coordinates. Another near miss with an asteroid sent a jolt through the pod. A surge of power coursed through the system. The escape pod's internal comm system, silent until now, crackled to life for a fleeting moment. Sector 9, priority. A distorted voice echoed through the pod before cutting out abruptly. Miller's eyes widened. He quickly accessed the comms panel, his fingers flying across the controls. He overrode the system, injecting a burst of coded data. Daxamite distress signal. Human military distress code. Sector 9, requesting immediate assistance. He cut the transmission before it could be traced or interrupted. Zara watched him, her brow furrowed. Human military code, why would you include that? It will only attract the wrong kind of attention. Miller glanced at her. Maybe, but it might also deter pirates. They're less likely to mess with a vessel that could be linked to a military force. Besides, he paused, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. It's a message someone might recognize. Zara remained unconvinced. Humans. I have heard stories. Not all of them are good. Miller sighed. I know, but it's done now. He turned back to the console, monitoring the failing life support systems. As if on cue, the environmental controls gave a final, sputtering sigh and died completely. The temperature plummeted. Zara shivered, her large form trembling slightly. Miller ripped sections of padding from the damaged compartment walls, creating makeshift blankets. He carefully draped them over Zara, tucking them around her paralyzed limbs. It's not much, but it's something. Days bled into each other. The escape pod drifted through the asteroid field, each near-miss collision a jolt of adrenaline and a reminder of their precarious situation. The emergency power reserves dwindled. Hope began to fade. Then Zara spoke, her voice barely a whisper. I sense something, a signal faint, but someone is receiving our transmission. Who? Miller asked, his voice hoarse. I do not know, Zara admitted, but the signal is distorted, weak. Suddenly, a garbled transmission crackled through the comms system. Static hissed and popped, obscuring the words, but one word repeated over and over cut through the noise. Phoenix. Phoenix, Phoenix, followed by a burst of static. Miller froze, his face paling. The word echoed in his mind, dredging up memories he had tried to bury. Zara looked at him, her alien eyes filled with a question he couldn't answer. Phoenix. What does it mean, Miller? Miller swallowed hard, his gaze meeting Zara's. Uncertain, afraid, and with a dawning sense of dread, he had no idea if the signal was a rescue or a death sentence. The beacon blinked, its activation confirmed. Miller stared at it, a muscle twitching in his jaw. What did you do? Zara met his gaze, her lupin eyes holding a strange mix of defiance and concern. I sent a distress signal. I heard the Phoenix designation, Miller said, his voice low, the words catching in his throat. A flicker of images, a burning ship, screams echoing in the void. He rubbed his temples, trying to suppress the resurfacing memories. Zara tilted her head, sensing his distress. Phoenix, what is the significance? Miller pushed himself away from the console, pacing the cramped space. It was a code name for a mission, a disaster. I don't want anything to do with it. The memory of that day, the crushing weight of responsibility, threatened to suffocate him. His squad vaporized, all because of a Phoenix designation. Zara's fingers danced across the console, her attention immediately back on the garbled signal. The transmission. It is layered, encrypted, intentionally obscured. Her brow furrowed in concentration. Minutes stretched into an eternity as Zara worked, her focus unwavering. Finally, she let out a soft, guttural sound. Partial decryption achieved. Location data. Nebula. The coordinates are fragmented, but Miller's blood ran cold. Let me see that. He squinted at the projected star chart. The nebula. It was close to where the Phoenix mission had gone dark. No, he muttered, shaking his head. No way. A high-pitched whine filled the pod as alarms blared. Red lights flashed, bathing the interior in an urgent glow. Proximity alert, space debris field imminent. Miller lunged for the controls, his hands flying across the panel. Brace yourself. He wrestled with the unresponsive controls, trying to steer the pod through the asteroid field. A shudder ran through the vessel, followed by a grinding screech. Damn it, systems failing. Life support regulator, Zara barked, her voice strained. Malfunction critical, oxygen levels are dropping. Miller swore, his mind racing. The distress signal, the Phoenix mission, and now this. We can't do both, he said, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Signal or life support? He didn't wait for her answer. Miller ripped open a panel, exposing a tangle of wires and sparking conduits. Diverting power from comms, he grunted, his hands moving with practiced speed. Hold tight. Zara, despite her paralysis, strained against her restraints, her mind clearly working furiously. Navigation override. Attempting recalibration, she announced, her voice tight with concentration, compensating for power drain. As Miller worked, Zara suddenly spoke. There is something here. Her voice was quiet but infused with surprise. A compartment hidden. She reached out with her good arm, fingers brushing against a panel. It slid open, revealing a small device. An emergency beacon. Before Miller could react, Zara activated it. What the hell did you do that for? Miller yelled. This beacon. It broadcasts openly, Zara stated, ignoring his anger. Preset message, help is on the way. Miller rounded on her, fury burning in his eyes. Are you insane? We don't know who's going to pick up that signal. We're sitting ducks. We were dying. Zara retorted, her voice rising to match his. I did what was necessary. Necessary? You just signed our death warrant, Miller spat. You don't trust anyone, do you? Before Zara could respond, a deafening crash rocked the pod. The lights flickered and died, plunging them into darkness. A piercing alarm shrieked, followed by the hiss of escaping air. Hull breach. Miller yelled, his voice barely audible above the chaos. He fumbled for his weapon, his heart pounding in his chest. Through the jagged tear in the hull, Miller saw them. Ships decloaking around them, their silhouettes sharp and menacing against the backdrop of the nebula. All hostile. The flicker of dying emergency lights painted the escape pod in strobing red. Miller's gaze snapped to the viewport. Two distortions shimmered against the starfield, like heat rising off scorching metal, cloaked ships positioned to intercept their trajectory. He cursed, a low, guttural sound. They're not letting us go. He ripped a panel off a ruined console, exposing a tangle of wires. With practiced speed, he stripped the wires bare, lashing them around a jagged piece of plasteel torn from a seat frame. Sparks flew with each twist. Not much, but it'll do in a pinch. He hefted the makeshift weapon, testing its weight. Those ships, Zara's voice, strained but clear, cut through the chaos. They belong to the Krell, mercenaries, notorious for their thoroughness. Miller spared her a glance. Krell, huh, never heard of them. He didn't like the sound of thoroughness. Zara's head tilted slightly, her multifaceted eyes focused on a holographic display flickering erratically. They are scanning for a specific energy signature, low-frequency, intermittent bursts. The Relic tech, Miller muttered, realization hardening his features. They know what we have, or what we had. Perhaps we can mislead them. Zara's voice was tight, pain lacing each word. The life support regulator, it's damaged, but if we rerouted power, amid a false signature, a decoy. Miller scoffed. You want me to jury-rig a busted regulator to attract a pack of bloodthirsty mercs? That's insane. It is our only option, Zara countered, her voice firm despite her obvious discomfort. And it plays to your strengths, human. Engineering repairs are. Your forte, are they not? He hesitated, his expression resolute. He hated relying on hunches, on impossible odds, but Zara was right. What choice did they have? Fine, he growled. But if this gets us killed? He moved to the damaged regulator, a mess of cracked casings and sparking wires. Zara, guiding him with precise instructions, directed him to bypass damaged circuits, reroute power conduits, and overload the frequency modulator. The air crackled with ozone as he worked, sweat beading on his forehead. Suddenly, the pod shuddered violently. Laser fire ripped across the hull, showering them with sparks and debris. A warning klaxon blared, a deafening shriek in the confined space. "Hurry!" Zara snapped, her voice filled with urgency. Miller ignored the pain blooming in his side, the metallic tang of blood in his mouth. He slammed the last wire into place, bracing for the inevitable. Now or never. He activated the modified regulator. A low hum filled the pod, followed by a series of erratic energy pulses that flickered across the internal sensors. Almost immediately, one of the cloaked ships detached from the other and veered off, pursuing the false energy signature. "It worked!" Miller exclaimed, a surge of adrenaline coursing through him. "Not for long," Zara replied grimly. Her fingers danced across a damaged console, sparks flying as she bypassed safety protocols. "While they are distracted, I will attempt to access their communications network." A moment later, she hissed, "I'm in. They are under contract to retrieve Project Phoenix assets." Miller frowned. "Project Phoenix? What the hell is that?" "I do not know," Zara admitted. "But I am intercepting fragmented messages. It appears to be more than a mission codename, an umbrella term." Miller's gut twisted. "For what?" Another burst of static crackled from the console. Zara strained to decipher the garbled transmission. Their destination, a derelict research station. Coordinates, locked. Miller froze. The coordinates, he knew them. Had tried to forget them. That's where they're going. That's impossible. I was forbidden to ever go there. The ship that had chased the false signal was already turning back, its cloak shimmering as it accelerated. "They detected the manipulation," Zara stated flatly. "They are returning." The escape pod lurched violently. Systems died one by one. Lights flickered and went out, plunging them into near darkness. The artificial gravity flickered, throwing Miller against the wall. "We're out of options," Miller said, his voice grim. He stared at the navigation console. A nearby asteroid field was their only hope. "Hold on." He punched the emergency thruster override. A jolt slammed them back into their seats as the escape pod shot forward, a desperate gamble towards the chaotic darkness. As they approached the asteroid field, the viewport filled with jagged rocks and swirling dust. Zara's voice cut through the groaning of the ship. "Navigating this field with no power is near impossible." But she paused, a flicker of perseverance in her eyes. "If you can get me outside, I can try to use my suit to remotely pilot the escape pod." The escape pod lurched, metal screaming as it was tossed about like a child's toy. Asteroids, some the size of small moons, others mere pebbles, whizzed past, illuminated by the pod's flickering emergency lights. Miller wrestled with the manual thrusters, his fist clenched against the worn controls. G-forces slammed him against his restraints, blurring his vision. "Damn it," he grunted, fighting to keep the pod from spinning out of control. "Hold on, Zara." He glanced at the paralyzed Daxamite strapped into the co-pilot's seat. Her silver fur was matted with sweat, her breathing ragged. "We need to get you prepped," Miller said, his voice strained. "Suit's your only chance out there." Zara's golden eyes flashed with defiance. "I am not helpless, human, but I will not be a burden either. The risk is too great." "The risk is staying here and getting vaporized," Miller countered, his tone hardening. He began methodically checking the seals on her environmental suit, his movements precise and efficient. This is happening. Reroute auxiliary power, Zara instructed, her voice surprisingly calm despite the chaos. Life support is failing. Divert it to the suit's environmental controls. Bypass the regulator on the port conduit, it's already overloaded. Miller hesitated, his brow furrowed. That's risky, Zara, you sure? Do you have a better idea, human? He trusted her instincts, even if he didn't fully understand them. He followed her instructions, sparks flying as he manipulated the damaged wiring. The pod's internal temperature plummeted, but the suit's indicators flickered to life. Suit's powered, he confirmed, his breath misting in the frigid air. But the thrusters, they're barely registering. They may not be powerful enough for you to effectively maneuver the pod. A flicker of something akin to amusement crossed Zara's face. I anticipated this eventuality long ago, human. A Daxamite warrior always prepares. I modified my suit years ago, just in case I needed to quickly move with my disabilities. The thrusters are enhanced, beyond Alliance standard. Miller stared at her, impressed despite himself. Show off. He reached for the damaged hatch release. Brace yourself. This is going to get cold. With a groan of protesting metal, the hatch hissed open, exposing Zara to the vacuum of space. The sudden loss of pressure sucked the remaining air from the pod, momentarily clouding the interior with ice crystals. Miller quickly secured the tether connecting Zara's suit to the pod, his eyes glued to the suit's vital signs display. Vitals stable, he reported, his voice tight with concern. Oxygen levels good. Can you hear me, Zara? A crackle of static, then Zara's voice, clear and strong. Loud and clear, human, prepare for remote piloting. I will guide us through this gauntlet. Zara, using her suit's enhanced thrusters, began to maneuver the escape pod with a surprising degree of skill. She threaded the needle between asteroids, her movements fluid and precise. The asteroid field, viewed from the external cameras, was a breathtaking spectacle of light and shadow, a deadly ballet of rock and ice. Then, a brief respite. One of the Krell ships, still in pursuit, was struck by a large asteroid. Its shields flickered and died, its engines sputtering. It limped away, trailing smoke and debris. One less problem, Miller muttered, allowing himself a moment of relief. Zara's voice, however, was sharp with focus. I am detecting a faint distress signal, emanating from one of the larger asteroids. Miller frowned. Distress signal? Who would be out here? Zara's fingers danced across the suit's control panel, analyzing frequency, cross-referencing with data extracted from the Krell network. A tense silence filled the pod, broken only by the hum of the suit systems. Match, Zara announced, her voice grim. The frequency matches that used by personnel associated with Project Phoenix. Miller's eyes widened. Project Phoenix, that's highly classified, Zara finished, and highly unlikely to be operating in this sector. Increased risk, Miller stated, his military training again seeking in. Zara ignored him. I am adjusting course. We are going to investigate. Zara, no, that's insane. We need to get clear of this field. We have no idea what we're flying into. We have a chance to save lives, human. That is enough. Zara steered the escape pod towards the asteroid, emitting the distress signal, her willpower unwavering. The asteroid loomed closer, a jagged, scarred monolith against the star-strewn sky. Suddenly, a burst of static crackled through Zara's suit's comms. The escape pod veered sharply to port, its trajectory sending it hurtling directly towards a massive asteroid. Zara, what's happening? Miller yelled, his hand instinctively reaching for the controls. Interference! Zara cried, her voice imbued with panic. I've lost control. Reacting instantly, Miller slammed his hand onto the manual override. He wrestled with the unresponsive controls, his muscles straining. He spotted a damaged thruster, its casing cracked and sparking. It was their only chance. Hold on, he yelled as he fired the damaged thruster at full power. The pod shuddered violently as the thruster roared to life, pushing them away from the impending collision, but the thruster couldn't handle the strain. With a deafening explosion, it detonated, sending shards of metal ripping through the pod. The force of the blast severed Zara's tether, the severed end whipping wildly in the void. "Zara!" Miller screamed, his heart pounding in his chest. He frantically tried to re-establish a connection with Zara's suit, his fingers flying across the console. But the communication lines were dead, the display blank. Zara was drifting away from the pod, a lone figure in the vast, unforgiving expanse of the asteroid field. Miller punched the depressurization sequence, ignoring the flashing red warning screaming about hull integrity. He ripped a spare environmental suit from its locker, the fabric cold and stiff against his skin. No time for a proper seal check. He just had to move. He grabbed a discarded emergency beacon, its casing cracked and sparking. With a few quick twists and jury-rigged connections using scavenged wiring, he fashioned a crude directional thruster, taping it securely to the back of the suit's oxygen tank. It wouldn't win any design awards, but it might just keep him alive. The escape pod's outer hatch hissed open, venting the remaining atmosphere into the void. Miller kicked off, the makeshift thruster sputtering to life, sending him tumbling into the chaotic ballet of the asteroid field. The silence was absolute, broken only by the rasp of his own breathing in his helmet. Asteroids, ranging in size from pebbles to small moons, whizzed past in a dizzying display of cosmic debris. He wrestled with the thruster, trying to maintain a stable trajectory, each burst of propulsion sending him spinning. The vast emptiness pressed in on him, a suffocating reminder of his isolation. He activated the suit's wideband distress signal, knowing the chances of it reaching anyone were slim. UES Kavik, this is Jake Miller requesting immediate assistance. Lost Daxamite pilot Zara, last known trajectory. Bearing 097, oxygen critical. Static crackled in his ears, the silence mocking his plea. 0G training, a voice echoed in his memory. Secure the casualty. Maintain orientation. He saw their faces, contorted in fear, their oxygen tanks reading empty. He'd hesitated, lost his grip. They were gone before he could react. Damn it, Miller. Not again. A flicker on his suit's energy scanner snagged his attention. An unusual spike, faint but persistent, emanating from a large, partially concealed asteroid. He adjusted his visor, squinting through the swirling dust. He ran a quick diagnostic on the energy signature. The data scrolled across his HUD. Frequency matched the Project Phoenix distress signal, the same signal that led them to this cursed wreck in the first place. Zara first, he told himself, fighting the tug of curiosity. Always Zara first. But the signal. It was too clean, too precise for a random malfunction. Could it be a clue? No. He purged the thought. He had to focus. Then he saw it. A faint glimmer reflecting off Zara's suit, a tiny spark against the black canvas of space. Her oxygen levels flashed red on his HUD. Critically low. He rerouted power from his suit's heating system, overriding the safety protocols. The sudden chill bit into him, but the thruster sputtered with renewed vigor. He pushed the makeshift device to its limit, the vibrations rattling his teeth. A small asteroid, no bigger than his fist, slammed into the thruster, shearing off a stabilizer fin. The device sputtered and died, sending him spinning wildly, further away from the faint glimmer of light. Zara, barely conscious, her vision blurring, heard a faint crackle in her helmet comms. The sound of Miller's struggling breaths, his desperate curses. With a monumental effort, she forced her paralyzed fingers to move, fumbling for the emergency flare. A burst of white light erupted from her suit, a tiny beacon in the darkness. Miller, ray-oriented by the flare, spotted Zara's drifting form, a fragile silhouette against the asteroid field. He extended a hand, grabbing onto her suit, the impact jarring his shoulder. He activated the last reserves of fuel in the makeshift thruster, a final, desperate burst of propulsion. They were moving. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, back towards the escape pod. He wrestled Zara through the hatch, sealing the chamber behind them. The artificial gravity reasserted itself, pulling them to the floor. He ripped off his helmet, his breath clouding in the cold air. He focused on Zara's pale face, her chest barely rising. Her eyes flickered open, glazed with pain. She coughed, a weak, rattling sound. "The Phoenix." She whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's a trap." Then her eyes rolled back and she went limp. Miller checked her vitals, weak pulse, shallow breathing. He had to stabilize her, and fast. He glanced back at the asteroid, its dark surface concealing something. He activated the escape pod scanner, targeting the asteroid. The results came back instantly. A large, artificial structure, masked by advanced cloaking technology. The escape pod's proximity alarm blared, a klaxon cutting through the silence. A Krell patrol ship decloaked nearby, its weapons array locking onto the escape pod. Miller killed the escape pod's engine, the sudden silence amplifying the creaks and groans of stressed metal. He punched the activation sequence for the emergency stealth system. A faint shimmer enveloped the pod, bending light around it like a heat haze. His fingers danced across the console, pulling up every available transmission frequency. Static hissed in his ears before a burst of clipped, guttural Krell language filled the small space. "Sector 7. Prisoner transport. Escaped. Locate and retrieve." The transmission faded in and out, choked with interference. Miller filtered the signal, cleaning it up enough to discern a search pattern. They were sweeping the debris field, systematian, live boxing them in. The Krell weren't just looking for a random escapee. "Damn it," Miller muttered, realizing the Daxamite beside him was more valuable than he initially thought. He glanced at Zara, her breathing shallow, her face pale. Whatever she was, the Krell wanted her back badly. He initiated a new transmission sequence, broadcasting on a seldom-used frequency, a desperate plea for assistance. "Unidentified vessel to any Alliance ships in range, this is a civilian transport under attack by Krell forces. We require immediate assistance. Coordinates." He rattled off a set of fabricated numbers far removed from their actual location. A long shot, but worth the gamble. Turning back to Zara, Miller accessed the pod's limited medical supplies. A hypospray of broad-spectrum antibiotics, a painkiller, and a nutrient solution. He administered them quickly, efficiently. Nothing he could do about the paralysis, but he could at least stabilize her vitals. A flicker of memory, unwelcome and sharp. A sterile briefing room, a cold-eyed colonel staring him down. "Miller, your squad's objective is paramount. Individual lives are expendable. Is that understood?" He pushed the memory down, focusing on the task at hand. He couldn't stay put. The Krell would find them eventually. He needed a distraction, a place to hide. He reactivated the escape pod sensors, scanning the surrounding asteroid field. One formation, larger than the rest, registered as an anomaly. An energy signature, faint but distinct, indicated a cloaked structure. Risky, but it was their only play. Miller restarted the engines, throttling them down to minimum output. The pod crept forward, a ghost in the void, toward the hidden asteroid. He adjusted the sensor array, focusing on the structure's interior. Tunnels, chambers, a network of interconnected spaces. He bypassed security protocols, feeding the data stream directly into the pod's main display. The image will-powered, revealing a large chamber dominated by complex machinery. Consoles blinked with alien symbols, wires snaked across the floor like metallic vines, and in the center of the room, rows of stasis pods hummed with contained energy. His gaze was drawn to the screens. Encrypted data logs filled the screens. Daxamite script. He pulled the logs, running a decryption program. The translated text scrolled across the display. Project Phoenix, a top-secret Daxamite research project. Interdimensional communication, more logs, more data. The project was shut down. Unforeseen consequences, potential instability, space-time continuum. The words sent a shiver down his spine. This wasn't just some forgotten research lab, it was a Pandora's box. He found it buried deep within the logs, failsafe mechanism activated. Prevent technology falling into wrong hands. Self-destruct sequence initiated. A failsafe. Activated. Time was running out. Beep, beep, beep. The proximity alarm blared, jolting him back to reality. The Krell ship had detected the energy signature from the cloak structure. They were onto him. A pulse of energy slammed into the asteroid, a warning shot. The cloaking field flickered, sputtered, and died, revealing the hidden structure in all its stark, metallic glory. Miller saw them then, Krell boarding parties, clad in heavy armor, launching from the ship like metallic locusts. They were coming. A weak sound broke through the chaos. Zara's eyes fluttered open. Her gaze was unfocused, her speech slurred. Miller, destroy it, destroy Phoenix, at all costs. Her voice was barely a whisper, tinged with pain and desperation. A high-frequency pulse emanated from the chamber, growing stronger with each passing second. Miller clamped his hands to his head, a searing pain lancing through his skull. The Phoenix equipment was humming, resonating, and something was terribly wrong. He ripped his weapon from its magnetic holster, a pulse rifle spitting blue energy. The Krell were at the outer hatch. He was out of time. He had a choice to make, and he had to make it now. His knuckles were white as he gripped the rifle, preparing to defend the escape pod, and Zara from the approaching Krell soldiers, with the Phoenix equipment humming ominously. The escape pod shuddered under a barrage of plasma fire. Miller ducked behind the control panel, the acrid smell of ozone stinging his nostrils. Sparks rained down, illuminating the cramped space. He risked a glance through the viewport. 3 Krell soldiers, clad in their insectal armor, advanced, weapons spitting emerald bolts. He returned fire, the pulse rifle bucking in his hands. The pod's automated defenses, a pair of stubby autocannons, whirred to life, adding to the chaotic symphony of destruction. The confined space was his only advantage, forcing the Krell to funnel through the narrow corridor. Then came a new sound, a high-pitched whine that vibrated through the metal floor. "They're using breaching tools," Miller grunted, reloading his rifle. "Prepared for everything," Zara hissed, her voice strained. "They know what this relic is and what it can do." A stray plasma bolt seared across Miller's forearm. He swore, ripping off a strip of cloth to bind the wound. The pain was a sharp, insistent throb, hindering his movements. "Damn it. Left, now," Zara barked, her tone urgent. "They're flanking you using the maintenance conduits. Krell tactic, standard for boarding actions. I saw it many times." Miller trusted her, shifting his position just as a Krell soldier emerged from a panel in the wall, weapon raised. He fired, the pulse rifle slamming the Krell back into the conduit. A muffled screech echoed from within the walls. Miller tried the comms again. Static. "They're jamming us. No signal is getting through." The breaching whine intensified, closer now. The pod's door buckled inward, showering sparks and molten metal. A Krell soldier, larger than the others, stepped through the breach, a heavy plasma cannon in its hands. Miller lunged, tackling the Krell to the ground. They grappled, the air thick with the smell of ozone and alien musk. Miller slammed the Krell's head against the metal floor again and again, until the soldier went limp. He scrambled back to his feet, but the breaching tool continued its work, a circular saw biting deeper into the hull. He had minutes, maybe less. "Miller," Zara said, her voice low and urgent. "The Phoenix Project. It is not just for interdimensional communication." He stared at her, his face grim. "What are you saying?" "It is also a weapon," she said, "of unimaginable power. If the Krell activate it, they could destabilize entire star systems. They have no regard for the space-time continuum." A high-frequency pulse emanated from the Phoenix core, intensifying with each passing second. Miller felt a wave of disorientation wash over him. His vision blurred, the edges of his sight turning gray. Zara continued, "The failsafe. It's designed to overload the core, destroying the technology. but it will also create a massive explosion. If it completes the entire asteroid, even their ship could be consumed. Miller hesitated. Destroy the Phoenix Project, potentially killing them both, or risk the Krell unleashing a weapon of unimaginable destruction. Inaction has consequences. The memory flashed through his mind. Sergeant Reyes bleeding out in the dust, whispering, "You should have pushed harder, Miller." He saw the faces of his fallen squad etched in his memory. He reached for a grenade on his belt, arming it with a twist. "I'm trusting you, Zara." He set the timer for 3 seconds. Not enough time to escape, but hopefully enough to trigger the failsafe quickly and minimize the blast radius. He pulled Zara closer, his hand resting on her shoulder. "I'm sorry I couldn't get you off this damn ship." Suddenly, the breaching tool tore through the last layer of the door. A Krell boarding party, weapons raised, filled the opening. The Phoenix core began to glow with a blinding light, bathing the escape pod in an eerie, pulsating luminescence. The failsafe was about to activate. The grenade hit the floor with a soft thud. Miller braced himself, squeezing his eyes shut an instant before the world erupted in white. A searing flash burned behind his eyelids, followed by a high-pitched whine that seemed to bore directly into his skull. He tasted ozone and metal, the recycled air suddenly thick and acrid. The grenade detonated, not with a bang, but a pulse. A wave of raw energy surged outward, bathing the escape pod in an eerie, crackling light. A chorus of Krell screams, abruptly cut short, punctuated the whine. "Miller!" Zara's cry was sharp, permeated with pain. He blinked, spots dancing in his vision, and saw her body arch against the restraints. Her fur bristled, and her breath came in ragged gasps. She was conscious, but the energy had clearly amplified her suffering. The Krell soldiers lay sprawled on the floor, twitching. Their usually obsidian eyes were milky white, unfocused. Incapacitated, not dead, resilient bastards. The high-pitched whine intensified, vibrating through the deck plates and into Miller's bones. It was a weapon in itself, designed to disorient and incapacitate. He had to get them out of here now. Miller stumbled forward, his equilibrium shot. He fumbled with Zara's restraints, his fingers clumsy and unresponsive. "Hold on," he grunted, finally managing to release the magnetic locks. He heaved her paralyzed form into his arms, the dead weight a stark reminder of her vulnerability. He didn't wait. He burst through the escape pod door, dragging Zara with him. Behind them, the pod shimmered, overloaded with energy. The explosion ripped through the small chamber an instant later. A wave of heat slammed into Miller's back, singeing his hair and charring his armor. He tucked Zara tighter against his chest, throwing himself forward to shield her. They were thrown clear, tumbling onto the metal grating of the corridor. The world swam. Alarms blared, a cacophony of klaxons and distorted announcements. The entire section of the asteroid base groaned, metal screaming against metal. Debris rained down from the ceiling, sparking conduits, twisted panels, and chunks of rockcrete. "Miller, get up." Zara's voice, though strained, cut through the chaos. "The Phoenix core. It's unstable. It will create a localized gravitational anomaly. This entire section. It will be crushed." He scrambled to his feet, adrenaline overriding the pain. Zara was right. He could feel it now, a subtle shift in gravity, a sense of being pulled in multiple directions at once. How long? Minutes, maybe less. We need to reach secondary transport bay 7 before the field collapses. He hoisted Zara back into his arms. "Which way?" She pointed with her chin, her eyes narrowed in concentration. "Corridor Beta 9. Krell patrol routes are usually light there, but be ready." They moved, Miller struggling to maintain his balance as the gravity field intensified. The corridors were a mangled mess of twisted metal and sparking wires. They encountered pockets of Krell, resistant small groups of soldiers, still dazed but armed and dangerous. Miller fought with brutal efficiency, using the collapsing environment to his advantage. He kicked a section of loose grating into one Krell's face, sending him sprawling. He used a falling conduit to electrocute another. His adaptability in combat was honed by years of experience, a grim necessity for survival. Left, now, Zara barked, her voice urgent. Around the debris field, they'll be expecting us to go right. Her knowledge of the Krell patrol routes was proving invaluable. Even paralyzed, she was guiding them through the maze of destruction. They rounded a corner and found themselves in a small, makeshift laboratory. A human figure lay slumped against a console, clad in a tattered lab coat. "Help me." The scientist croaked, his voice weak. "Please." "He's one of ours," Miller said grimly, assessing the scientist's condition. "Malnourished, dehydrated, and clearly injured." "Miller, we don't have time," Zara protested. "The gravity field. What were you working on?" Miller asked the scientist, ignoring Zara's protests. "The Phoenix Project. The Krell, they forced me." The scientist coughed, blood flecking his lips. "They want to use it to create interdimensional wormholes. For invasion." The stakes had just been raised. Interdimensional invasion. This wasn't just about escaping a collapsing base, it was about preventing a war. "Can you walk?" Miller asked. The scientist shook his head. "No, Cly. Number 2 weak." Miller looked at Zara, then back at the scientist. He made his decision. He carefully laid Zara down against a relatively stable wall. "I'll be right back." He scooped up the scientist, cradling him in his arms. The scientist was feather light, barely more than skin and bones. He turned back to Zara. "We're not leaving him behind." They finally reached Secondary Transport Bay 7. It was a scene of controlled chaos. Emergency lights flickered, casting long, distorted shadows. Several transport ships were damaged beyond repair, their hulls breached and their engines cold. Only one ship remained, its engines humming, ready for launch, but it was heavily guarded. A squad of Krell soldiers stood between them and the transport, their weapons trained on the bay doors. Zara's breath hitched. Her eyes narrowed, focusing on the lead Krell soldier. A low growl rumbled in her chest, a sound of pure, unadulterated rage. "That one," she hissed, her voice barely a whisper. "That's him. He oversaw my torture." The corridor bucked, a groan of tortured metal echoing through the failing emergency lights. Miller shoved Zara's chair forward, the scientist stumbling alongside, his breath ragged. Each tremor threatened to buckle the already compromised supports. "Almost there," Miller grunted, the transport ship a beacon of potential salvation at the end of the passage. They reached the bay doors only to find them sealed and guarded. 4 Krell soldiers clad in obsidian armor stood watch, their energy rifles trained on the entrance. Leading them was the same scarred Krell Zara had identified earlier. His mandibles clicked, a sound like grinding stone. "Breach and clear," Miller ordered, already moving. He activated his energy shield, the shimmering blue a stark contrast to the flickering red lights. The firefight erupted instantly. Miller took cover behind a stack of crates, the air thick with the sizzle of energy blasts. He returned fire, using controlled bursts to keep the Krell pinned down. Zara, despite her paralysis, was far from helpless. She wrestled a fallen Krell rifle into position, bracing it against her chair. Energy bolts ripped from the weapon, forcing the Krell to divert their attention. Her aim was surprisingly accurate, a testament to Daxamite warrior training. "Radiation levels critical," the scientist gasped, clutching his chest. His skin was flushed, and his breathing grew more labored with each passing second. "Gotta get out." Miller risked a glance. 2 Krell down, but the other 2 were heavily entrenched. He needed a diversion. He tossed a grenade, the flash bang momentarily blinding the remaining guards. He used the opportunity to flank them, taking them down with precise shots. Then Zara, fueled by a rage Miller couldn't fully comprehend, broke from cover. "You killed my family." She roared, firing wildly at the Krell leader. "Zara, no," Miller yelled, knowing it was a death wish. The Krell leader was heavily armored, her shots were doing little more than scratching the paint. Their objective, the scientist, and her own safety were paramount. The Krell leader simply angled his shield, deflecting the energy blasts. He advanced, his weapon charging. Zara was exposed, vulnerable. Miller didn't hesitate. He dove in front of Zara, taking the brunt of the Krell leader's attack. The energy blast seared his side, the pain a white-hot brand. He staggered but kept his feet. Ignoring the burning agony, he lunged, tackling the Krell leader to the ground. A desperate struggle ensued, Miller finally managing to jam his combat knife into a chink in the Krell's armor. The Krell leader went still. Miller ripped the knife free, his side screaming in protest. He glanced at Zara, relief flooding him as he saw she was unharmed. The transport ship, however, wasn't so lucky. A stray shot had disabled the launch mechanism. "I can fix it." The scientist wheezed, staggering towards the control panel. Despite his rapidly deteriorating condition, he began rerouting power, bypassing damaged circuits. Sparks flew, the air thick with the smell of ozone. With a final surge of effort, the scientist hit his fist onto the activation button. The transport ship shuddered, its engines sputtering to life. Go now." He croaked, collapsing against the wall. Miller hauled Zara onto the transport, then scooped up the scientist, practically throwing him inside. He jumped in after them, slamming the launch sequence. The transport ship shot out of the bay just as the asteroid base groaned, the gravitational anomaly intensifying. Chunks of rock and metal were ripped apart, swirling into a chaotic vortex. The transport ship strained against the pull, its engines screaming. They cleared the asteroid field, but not unscathed. An alarm blared, the navigation system flashing red. "Navigation offline," Miller said grimly. "We're lost." The scientist, barely conscious, stirred. They wanted Phoenix Core. He rasped, "Open multiple wormholes. Destabilize galaxy. Invasion." He coughed, blood flecking his lips. "Core. Unstable. Without calibration. Destroy systems." Zara, her face etched with shame, finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. I am sorry, Miller, my recklessness. I jeopardized everything." Miller stared at her, his face grim. The pain in his side was a constant reminder of her impulsiveness. But he saw the genuine remorse in her eyes. "We're alive," he said, his voice hard but not unkind. "And we know what the Krell are planning. We need to work together, Zara, trust each other, or we're all dead anyway." The transport ship groaned, metal protesting against stresses it was never meant to endure. Miller ran a diagnostic, the results painting a grim picture on his visor's HUD. Critical systems failing, life support marginal, engines sputtering their last. "We're running on fumes, Zara," he said, his voice tight. "Another few hours maybe before we're space dust." The scientist coughed, a wet, rattling sound that echoed in the cramped cockpit. His skin had taken on a sickly, translucent pallor, the radiation burns livid against his face. "I don't have much time," he rasped, each word an effort. "Gotta calibrate the Phoenix Core." Zara, her multifaceted eyes scanning the sensor readings, spoke with a newfound urgency. "I am detecting a faint energy signature approximately 2 light minutes distant, a derelict." Miller's eyes hardened. "A derelict out here? That's just begging for a Krell ambush." He spat the word Krell like venom. "Negative Krell signatures present," Zara countered, her voice firm. "The energy readings are consistent with pre-wormhole technology. It predates both human and Daxamite space travel. It could hold resources, repair components. Our only chance." He hesitated, the image of his dead squad flashing through his mind. Trusting a seemingly easy solution had cost them everything. "It could also be a trap, Zara. A risk we must take, Miller. The alternative is certain death." Her voice left no room for argument. He gripped his pulse rifle, the familiar weight grounding him. "All right, but we go in hot. Weapons ready. No damn surprises." The derelict loomed before them, a colossal silhouette against the starfield. Its hull was scarred and pitted, a testament to unimaginable eons adrift in the void. It was like a graveyard, silent and vast. They breached the outer hull, the hiss of escaping atmosphere swallowed by the vacuum. Inside, the derelict was eerily intact, but coated in a thick layer of dust. Flickering emergency lights cast long, dancing shadows, revealing signs of a violent, desperate past. Scorch marks scarred the walls and twisted metal lay strewn across the decks. "Damn," Miller muttered, his pulse rifle sweeping the corridors. Something bad went down here. Zara, her chair whirring softly, analyzed a series of scattered data logs. These logs, they detail a plague. A highly virulent pathogen that wiped out the entire crew, symptoms included. She paused, her voice grim. Hemorrhaging, organ failure, rapid cellular decay. The scientist gasped, clutching his chest. Pre-wormhole, this ship. It could be the key, the Phoenix core, its calibration matrix. It needs a temporal anchor, something that predates wormhole tech. This ship could provide it. Zara focused on a large, cylindrical structure humming faintly in the distance. "I have located a functional power core. It could provide enough energy to jumpstart our transport ship systems, and potentially the Phoenix core." Miller, moving cautiously through the darkened corridors, discovered a hidden compartment. Inside, racks of advanced energy weapons and protective gear gleamed under the emergency lights. "Jackpot," he said, a sliver of hope flickering in his chest. "Looks like someone was expecting trouble." As they began the delicate process of transferring power from the derelict's core to their transport ship, the derelict suddenly sprang to life. Automated turrets swiveled, their barrels glowing with deadly energy. Drones, sleek and menacing, detached from the walls, their energy weapons charging. "Shit!" Miller yelled, diving for cover as energy bolts ripped through the corridor. Defense systems are active. Zara, struggling to maintain control of her chair, shouted over the din of alarms. "They are targeting us as hostile entities. We need to disable them." The scientist, his breathing shallow and ragged, pointed a trembling finger at the derelict schematics. "The logs, override code, bypass security protocols." His words faded into a fit of coughing. Zara, her fingers flying across her console, worked feverishly. "I am attempting to disable the primary defense grid. Daxamite algorithms. Adapting." Now, with a final keystroke, the turrets fell silent. But as the primary grid went offline, a klaxon blared, even louder than before. Red lights flashed, bathing the ship in an ominous glow. "Secondary system activated," Zara yelled. "Quarantine protocol initiated. Sections of the ship are being sealed off." Miller swore under his breath. "Quarantine? What the hell for?" Zara's eyes widened. "The plague, the logs. The quarantine protocol is designed to contain the pathogen. It may still be active." The scientist collapsed, his body racked with convulsions. "Complete. The mission. Phoenix core. Temporal frequency." He gasped one last time, his eyes glazing over. Zara looked at Miller, her expression grim. "We need to contain the plague, secure the power core, and calibrate the Phoenix core, all before we are sealed in here. Or worse." As if to punctuate her statement, a faint signal crackled over their comms. Static, then a burst of distorted audio. "Tracking, derelict, Krell." Miller swore, the word echoing in the cramped transport ship. "All right, Zara, quarantine. What are we sealing off first?" Zara, her voice strained but firm, projected a schematic onto the nearest console. "Sections 4 through 7, decks 2 and 3. The initial outbreak originated there. Bulkheads 12, 15, and 19 should be sufficient if reinforced. Time is critical, Jake." The metallic clang of Miller slamming a containment panel into place was his reply. He worked with a practiced efficiency born of countless combat situations, welding seams and reinforcing weak points with scavenged metal. Zara, her fingers flying across the console, monitored the ship systems. "Jake," she said, her voice tight with urgency, "I've analyzed the atmospheric readings. The plague, it's airborne, spreading through the ventilation system." Miller cursed again, a guttural sound. "Damn it, options. Reroute the ventilation, vent the contaminated sections into space." But Zara hesitated. "The system is damaged, a manual override is required. Section 7, Deck 3. the heart of the contamination zone. He didn't hesitate. Protective gear. Zara accessed the weapon's cache manifest. Limited, full biosuits. Enough for one person. The air hung thick with unspoken understanding. The risk was astronomical. Miller took a deep breath, the recycled air tasting like metal and fear. "I'll do it." He moved quickly, donning the bulky biosuit, the hiss of the seals a stark counterpoint to the groaning of the derelict ship around them. As Miller navigated the corridors towards Section 7, Zara worked to stabilize the Phoenix core for transport. "Power levels fluctuating, Jake," she reported, her voice imbued with concern. "The derelict's core is dangerously unstable." Suddenly, a surge of energy pulsed through the ship, the lights flickering violently. Zara cried out, a sharp, ragged sound. "Zara, what's wrong?" Miller shouted over the comms, his heart pounding. "Magnetic field, localized power surge, disrupting my mobility systems." Her voice was strained, each word an effort. "Intense pain, Jake, can't move." Miller fought his way through the twisting corridors, the biosuit feeling like a lead weight. He reached the ventilation control junction, the air thick with the sickly sweet smell of decay. He ignored it, focusing on the task at hand. Wrench in hand, he wrestled with the corroded access panel, sparks flying as he forced it open. Minutes stretched into an eternity as he bypassed damaged circuits and rerouted power lines. Finally, with a triumphant grunt, he slammed the final connection into place. The ventilation system roared to life, sucking the contaminated air out of the quarantined sections and venting it into the cold vacuum of space. He barely had time to seal the access panel before scrambling back towards the transport ship, the klaxons blaring a deafening warning. He found Zara slumped against the console, her metallic limbs twitching uncontrollably. The surge. It triggered a localized magnetic field, she gasped, her voice weak. Without hesitation, Miller grabbed a heavy wrench and began smashing the magnetic field regulator, ignoring the sparking wires and the smell of burning metal. He worked with a primal strength, fueled by adrenaline and a fierce protectiveness. With a final, desperate blow, the regulator shattered. The magnetic field collapsed. Zara slumped forward, momentarily unconscious. Miller caught her, his arms straining with her weight. "You all right?" he asked, his voice rough with concern. Zara groaned, slowly regaining awareness. "Containment field." "Weakening," she whispered, gesturing towards the derelict's power core. Bursts of raw energy crackled around it, threatening to breach the containment field entirely. "We need to move now." Miller hauled Zara onto his back, her paralyzed limbs heavy and awkward. "Wait," Zara cried out, a sudden spark of realization in her eyes. The scientist's clue, the frequency, the Phoenix core. They raced back to the transport ship, Miller struggling under Zara's weight and the unstable power core. Zara, her fingers flying across the Phoenix core's interface, worked feverishly to calibrate its energy output. Almost there. She muttered, her brow furrowed in concentration, matching the frequency to the derelict's core. A blinding flash of energy erupted from the Phoenix core, overloading the transport ship systems. The lights flickered and died, plunging them into darkness. "Damn it," Miller yelled, stumbling in the sudden blackness. Then, as quickly as it had vanished, the power returned. But something was different. A previously unnoticed section of the derelict ship, visible through the transport's viewport, was now illuminated. A holographic display shimmered into existence, filling the darkened space with ethereal light. The display showed a breathtaking vista, barren, lifeless worlds transforming into lush, vibrant ecosystems. A voice, ancient and resonant, echoed in their minds. "Our mission to sow the seeds of life among the stars." Zara gasped, "The derelict. It's a seed ship, designed to spread life to barren worlds." Miller stared at the holographic display, his pupils dilating. "But the plague?" Zara's voice was somber. "A safeguard, a failsafe, to prevent the seed ship's technology from falling into the wrong hands." The plague would activate if the ship was tampered with, ensuring no one could exploit its power. She looked at the Phoenix core with newfound understanding. The Phoenix core. It's not just a power source, Jake, it's a key. A key to unlocking the seed ship's potential, a way to save countless worlds. Suddenly, the Krell's signal intensified, blaring through the comms system. Outside, a Krell warship decloaked, its menacing silhouette filling the viewport. A harsh, guttural voice filled the transport ship. Unidentified vessel, you are in violation of Krell space. Surrender the Phoenix core immediately. Failure to comply will result in your destruction. Miller looked at Zara, his face grim. The choice was clear. Abandon the Phoenix core and possibly escape with their lives, or risk everything to protect the seed ship's technology from the Krell. He waited for Zara to speak, but he already knew what the answer was. Eat vacuum, Krell, Miller spat into the comm, severing the connection. He glanced at Zara, her wolfish features tight with concentration as she manipulated the holographic controls. Sparks flew from a nearby console, the air thick with the smell of ozone. How much longer, Zara? Almost. The Phoenix core is proving resistant. The seed ship systems are archaic, yet surprisingly resilient, she grunted, her fingers dancing across the interface. Just need to recalibrate the resonance frequency. A klaxon blared, bathing the cramped transport ship in a pulsating red light. They're boarding, Miller barked, grabbing his pulse rifle. Brace yourself. The first Krell burst through the mangled doorway, their insectoid eyes gleaming in the dim light. Miller unleashed a volley of plasma fire, dropping the lead Krell before it could raise its weapon. He ducked behind a stack of crates, returning fire as more Krell poured into the corridor. He knew these cramped corridors better than they did. He'd spent hours mapping them in his head. He used the knowledge now, setting up ambushes with jury-rigged explosives, turning maintenance shafts into deadly kill zones. Each fallen Krell bought Zara precious seconds. Daxamite ingenuity at work, Miller muttered, reloading his rifle. He risked a glance at Zara. Her brow was furrowed in concentration, her hands moving with blurring speed. Suddenly, a series of lights flickered on the main view screen, revealing a star chart unlike any Miller had ever seen. I've partially activated the seed ship's control system, Zara announced, her voice strained. It reveals a map of habitable worlds, worlds targeted by this ship. But the revelation was short-lived. A new alarm blared even louder than the first. A green mist began to seep from the ventilation shafts, carrying with it a chilling sense of dread. What is that? Miller demanded, coughing. Zara's eyes widened in horror. The plague dispersal system, it's been reactivated. But why? It must be a failsafe, Zara explained grimly. Or, the Krell knew about it. They never wanted the ship, just the plague. To weaponize it, spread it across the galaxy. Miller felt a cold dread grip his heart. The plague wasn't just a weapon of destruction, it was a tool of galactic domination. Zara was already working, trying to analyze the systems. I can override it, Zara said, her voice filled with steadfast perseverance. But it requires a manual override at the central control console. It's too risky. The area will be highly contaminated. Miller didn't hesitate. I'll do it. Miller, no, you don't understand the risks. Someone has to, Zara. You're needed here to keep the Krell off my back. Before Zara could protest, Miller was already moving, sprinting through the ship's twisting corridors towards the central control console. He felt a tremor run through the ship as another section buckled and collapsed. He rounded a corner and slammed into a Krell commander, its mandibles snapping open in a silent snarl. The commander lunged, its claws tearing at Miller's armor. Miller roared, throwing the Krell off balance. He smacked his fist into its faceplate, shattering the fragile material. A brutal hand-to-hand fight ensued, the two combatants grappling and slamming against the metal walls. Miller, fueled by adrenaline and desperation, managed to gain the upper hand, pinning the Krell commander to the ground. He raised his fist and brought it down with bone-crushing force, silencing the alien forever. But the victory came at a cost. Miller felt a searing pain in his side. He looked down to see a gash in his armor, exposing his flesh to the toxic atmosphere. He was infected. Ignoring the pain, Miller staggered towards the central control console. The room was a mess of sparking wires and shattered displays. He could see the override panel, but it was heavily damaged, wires severed and circuits fried. He began to work feverishly, using his multi-tool to reconnect the damaged circuits. His hands trembled with exertion and the effects of the plague, but he refused to give up. He remembered his squad, their faces burned into his memory. He couldn't let their sacrifice be in vain. He wouldn't let the Krell win. Come on, he muttered, his vision blurring. With a final surge of strength, he connected the last wire. The override panel flickered to life. He initiated the sequence, praying it would work. Suddenly, the ship lurched violently. A message flashed across the console. Power core instability detected. Critical mass imminent. Zara, Miller shouted into his comm. The power core is going critical. I see it. Zara replied, her voice frantic. The Phoenix core. It can be used as a conduit to channel the energy into the seed ship, stabilize it, but it will destroy the transport ship. Miller knew what she was asking, sacrificing their only means of escape to save countless worlds. There was no other choice. Do it, Zara, he said, his voice filled with grim grit. Do it now. Zara initiated the energy transfer. The Phoenix core began to glow with an intense light, drawing power from the unstable core. The transport ship shuddered violently, groaning under the strain. Outside, the Krell warship closed in, its weapons charging. But as the energy transfer reached its peak, a wave of energy pulsed outwards from the seed ship, washing over the Krell warship. Its weapons systems sputtered and died, leaving it dead in the water. The energy pulse, however, had some unforeseen consequences. The seed ship began to glow in strange patterns. The habitable world maps on the monitor shifted and changed, and a strange, echoing voice filled the transport ship. It was speaking in a language that neither Miller nor Zara had ever heard before, yet somehow they understood every word. The ship shuddered violently. Klaxons blared, bathing the corridor in strobing red light. Lockdown initiated, Zara's voice echoed in Miller's helmet, strained. Sections 4 through 8 are sealed, we're trapped. Miller cursed, thumping his hand against the bulkhead. Escape pods. In Section 8, Zara replied, her voice weaker. Beyond the lockdown, and something's happening, my mind. It's clearer, sharper, but my body. It feels distant, fading. Outside, the Krell warship pulsed with renewed energy. They're rerouting power, Zara warned. Weapons charging. They'll be ready for another pass soon. Miller stared down the corridor, the sealed bulkhead a stark barrier. This isn't just a malfunction, is it? This is deliberate. I'm detecting a previously unknown energy signature, Zara confirmed, her voice filled with a hint of fear. Emanating from within the locked-down area, something significant is contained within. He activated his thermal vision, scanning the sealed section. Faint heat signatures pulsed rhythmically behind the bulkhead. Life support systems, multiple stasis pods. Daxamite, Zara breathed, her voice barely a whisper. Ancient, from before the plague. Her enhanced mind was painting a clearer picture, but at a cost. The energy pulse. It's destabilizing the pods, they're failing. If they wake up disoriented, Miller growled, they won't be friendly and they'll be carrying the plague. Worse, Zara said, her voice gaining strength, the Krell. They aren't just here for the plague, they want control of the ship and its crew. I sense their intentions, they want to weaponize them. The comm crackled with static. Another boarding party detected, Zara announced. They're adapting their tactics, breaching the transport ship's defenses, quickly. Miller assessed the situation. Trapped, hostile aliens on the verge of Awen Ning and Krell closing in. The Phoenix core, he said, a plan forming in his mind. It's got enough power, we can use it to manually override the lockdown. Risky, Zara countered. It's not designed for that kind of power surge, and moving it will make you a target. It's our only shot, Miller said, hefting the Phoenix core. Guide me. Zara's mental presence intensified, a cool, calming voice in his ear. Corridor Alpha 7. Krell patrols to the west. Vent shaft access to the east. Go now. Miller moved, the Phoenix core humming with contained energy. He navigated the labyrinthine corridors, Zara's voice a constant guide. He rounded a corner and slammed into a pair of Krell warriors. Plasma fire scorched the walls as he dove for cover. He returned fire, his pulse rifle spitting bolts of energy. He took one down, the other staggered back, clutching its chest. Miller finished it with a brutal kick, then pressed on, the Phoenix core a heavy weight in his arms. They're diverting power to the lockdown control panel, Zara informed him. Heavy defenses. They know what we're planning. He reached the control panel, a fortified alcove guarded by a squad of Krell soldiers. Now or never, Miller muttered, charging forward. Plasma fire erupted, forcing him to take cover behind an overturned crate. Zara's voice cut through the chaos. Grenade 3 meters to your left, they're flanking. Miller grabbed the grenade and tossed it, the explosion clearing the way. He rose, firing his pulse rifle, taking down 2 more Krell. The remaining soldiers returned fire, pinning him down. I'm initiating the override sequence. Miller shouted, accessing the control panel. Sparks flew as he bypassed the security protocols. Suddenly, the lights flickered and the corridor filled with a high-pitched whine. Warning, a synthetic voice boomed. Automated defense system activated. Threat detected. Commencing elimination protocol. From the shadows, sleek metallic drones emerged, their weapons targeting everything in sight. The Krell, caught off guard, returned fire, but the drones were too fast, too efficient. The control panel was caught in the crossfire. Chaos erupted. Then a stasis pod ruptured. A figure emerged, tall and powerfully built, clad in ancient Daxamite armor. Its eyes glowed with a fierce, disoriented rage. It roared, a primal sound that shook the corridor. The Daxamite spotted Miller, his human form a clear indicator of the enemy. With a speed that belied its age, it lunged, its clawed hand reaching for Miller's throat. Miller dropped behind a cluster of sparking conduits, the air crackling with ozone. The Krell soldiers, momentarily distracted by the awakened Daxamite, hadn't seen him break away. He risked a glance at the security drones, their crimson optics painting the corridor in lethal crosshairs, were the real problem. The Daxamite, freed from its stasis pod, was a whirlwind of raw, unfocused power. It roared, a sound that vibrated through Miller's bones, lashing out at anything that moved. Krell, drones, even the walls of the ship itself. Its eyes, wide and unfocused, betrayed a profound disorientation, a mind struggling to grasp its surroundings. Miller, Zara's voice crackled in his ear, strained but sharp. The drones, their targeting matrix, it's primitive, predictable. They prioritize targets based on movement and energy signatures. There's a subroutine vulnerability. If you can create enough chaotic interference. He didn't need her to finish. He already had an idea. Thanks, Zara. Hold tight. Miller sprinted towards a wrecked weapons locker, ripping open the mangled metal with practiced ease. He grabbed a handful of Krell pulse grenades, their casings cracked and leaking energy. Perfect. He activated 2, tossed them in opposite directions, then fired a sustained burst from his rifle at a cluster of exposed power cables. The resulting cascade of sparks and explosions sent the drones into a frenzy, their targeting systems overloaded. They began firing indiscriminately, catching several Krell in the crossfire. Zara gasped, a sharp intake of breath that cut through the comms. Miller, the strain, I can barely maintain focus. Her voice faded, punctuated by ragged breaths. He could feel her weakening, her mental presence flickering like a dying flame. Ignoring the chaos around him, Miller grabbed another pulse rifle from a fallen Krell. He ripped out its power cell, then jammed it into the damaged casing of a drone he'd managed to cripple with a well-placed shot. The drone shuddered, its circuits overloaded. It spun wildly, firing erratically before exploding in a shower of sparks and twisted metal, taking another drone with it. The awakened Daxamite, meanwhile, was proving a formidable opponent. Even in its disoriented state, its movements were fluid and deadly, its bare hands crushing Krell armor like tin foil. It moved with a savage grace, a predator unleashed. Suddenly, Zara's voice, weaker now, filled with a strange urgency. "Miller, I'm seeing fragments, images, a mission, a destination." Something about a plague. Miller cursed under his breath. A plague? What plague? He needed to know more, but the Krell were regrouping, focusing their fire on the Daxamite. "It's too dangerous to continue to try to probe the memories, Miller," Zara said wearily. "I can feel my own mind slipping." He saw the Krell commander bark orders pointing directly at the Daxamite. They knew. They knew what it was, what it represented. Without hesitation, Miller charged forward, firing his rifle, drawing the Krell's attention. "You want him, you gotta go through me." He knew it was a reckless move, but he couldn't let them kill it. Not yet. A searing pain ripped through his side as a pulse blast grazed his armor. He staggered, momentarily stunned. Then a new voice, a low, guttural growl, echoed in his mind. It was Zara, but different, stronger somehow. Connected to the Daxamite. "Calm, I can, calm." The Daxamite slowed, its eyes focusing for a fleeting moment. "The ship, it carries a seed." Zara's voice, now a strange blend of her own and the Daxamite's, echoed in his mind. "A seed of life or death, the crew. They are linked, minds intertwined with the ship itself." "Linked?" Miller asked, firing blindly. "The stasis pods, they wipe. If the link is broken, if the ship is not operated correctly." Miller gritted his teeth. "Then we need to get to the stasis pods, and we need your help." He turned to the Daxamite, meeting its gaze. "I can help you remember. I can help you understand what's happening, but you have to trust me." The Daxamite hesitated, then nodded slowly, a flicker of intelligence returning to its eyes. Before they could move, Zara's voice, now a mere whisper, crackled in his ear. "Miller, reinforcements, Krell, many." A booming voice echoed through the corridor. "All units, prioritize the Daxamite, capture alive. I repeat, capture the Daxamite alive. It is vital to our mission." "Time to go," Miller said, grabbing the Daxamite's arm. "Let's move." They sprinted down the corridor, the sound of approaching Krell soldiers echoing behind them. They reached the stasis pod control room, a heavily fortified chamber guarded by automated turrets and the remaining Krell. "This is it," Miller said, bracing himself. "Get ready." They charged into the room, and then Zara screamed, a sharp, piercing cry that cut through the din of battle. Her presence in his mind vanished, leaving him cold and alone. He glanced back to see her slumped against the wall, unconscious. The Daxamite roared and looked at Zara. "The memories in stasis," Zara said faintly. "They're being purged." The stasis pod control room erupted. Blaster fire chewed chunks from the durasteel walls, ricochets whining past Miller's ears. He shoved the disoriented Daxamite behind a toppled console, the alien's massive frame trembling. Automated turrets swiveled, targeting them with relentless precision, while Krell soldiers, their chitinous armor gleaming under the emergency lights, advanced with guttural war cries. "Hold tight," Miller yelled, already fishing for the smoke grenades he'd scavenged from the fallen Krell near the entrance. He cooked one off, tossing it into the center of the room. Thick gray smoke billowed, obscuring the turret's targeting sensors and buying them precious seconds. He grabbed the Daxamite's arm, pulling him forward. "Move, we need to get to that console." They stumbled through the smoke-filled room, coughing and gasping. Suddenly, the Daxamite froze, his eyes widening in confusion. He shoved Miller back, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "Traitor." Krell scum. Miller barely dodged a wild swing of the Daxamite's massive paw. Memory fragmentation. "Shit. It's me, Miller, we're on the same side. Zara sent me." He grabbed the Daxamite's face, forcing him to meet his gaze. Remember Zara, the plague, we have to stop it. The Daxamite's eyes flickered, recognition warring with confusion. He shook his head, groaning. Zara, yes. The plague. The moment passed, leaving him dazed but compliant. A voice boomed through the room, amplified by the Krell commander's helmet. Focus fire on the control systems. The Daxamite is secondary. Prevent the memory purge from being reversed. Miller cursed. They knew. He propelled the Daxamite forward, weaving through the smoke and blaster fire. They reached the main control console, a towering structure of alien metal and glowing glyphs. Miller slapped his hand against the surface, searching for an interface. All right, big guy, you know this tech. What do we do? The Daxamite stared blankly at the console, his brow furrowed. Access. Code. Fragmented. He clutched his head, wincing in pain. Partial sequence. Delta. 7 Sigma. Miller's eyes scanned the console logs, a chaotic stream of alien characters scrolling across the screen. Delta. 7 Sigma. Got it. We need 3 more digits. Where are they? He tapped furiously at the console, bringing up diagnostic readouts. Damn it, this interface is a nightmare. A wave of Krell soldiers broke through the smoke, unleashing a hail of blaster fire. Miller dove behind the console, returning fire with his pulse rifle. He risked a glance at the Daxamite, who was still struggling with his memories. Suddenly, the turrets stuttered, their firing patterns becoming erratic. One by one, they powered down. Miller. Zara's voice echoed in his mind, faint but clear. I'm trying to help. Turrets, disabled. Her mental presence flickered, then vanished. She was pushing herself too hard. Thanks, Zara, Miller yelled, knowing she couldn't hear him. He risked another glance at the console logs, his fingers flying across the alien interface. Got it, the missing sequence. Omega 3 Alpha. As he input the final digit, a blaster bolt seared through his armor, impacting against his side. He cried out in pain, stumbling back. The Daxamite roared, throwing himself in front of Miller, shielding him from the Krell fire. A bolt struck his shoulder, sending him sprawling. Miller scrambled back to the console, ignoring the pain. He slammed his hand against the activation rune. The console hummed and a series of glyphs flashed across the screen. Override initiated. Memory purge slowed. Core memory banks corrupted. Full system reboot required. Reboot, Miller yelled, his voice hoarse. What does that mean? Life support. Will fail. The Daxamite gasped, clutching his wounded shoulder. Stasis pods, vulnerable. We can't reboot the system, Miller exclaimed. Everyone on this ship will die. It is the only way. The Daxamite insisted, his voice weak but firm. The plague must not be released. Miller stared at the console, his mind racing. He had seconds to make a decision, save the memories or save the people in stasis. He noticed a single stasis pod tucked away in a darkened alcove away from the rest. The Daxamite seemed to notice it as well. No, the Daxamite roared, his voice filled with anguish, his fragmented memories suddenly snapping into focus. Leah, my daughter, she's in that pod, save her. The Krell commander, seeing his opportunity, screamed an order. Full assault. Prevent the reboot at all costs. Miller knew what he had to do. He took a deep breath, steeling his dedication. He reached for the reboot rune, his fingers trembling. I'm sorry, he muttered. He slammed his hand down. The console shuddered and the room plunged into darkness. Alarms blared and the artificial gravity flickered, throwing Miller and the Daxamite against the console. The Krell soldiers, momentarily disoriented, opened fire blindly. Miller returned fire, his pulse rifle spitting bolts of energy into the darkness. The stasis pods began to flicker, their occupants suspended between life and death. As the oxygen thinned and the darkness closed in, Miller and the Daxamite collapsed, gasping for breath. Zara, using every ounce of her remaining energy, focused her mind, reaching out across the void. A desperate telepathic burst, a plea for help, sent outward into the cold, uncaring darkness, hoping beyond hope that someone somewhere would hear. The world swam back into focus for Miller, a kaleidoscope of sparking wires and shattered consoles. He blinked, tasting ozone and blood. Beside him, Zara shuddered, her massive form trembling. The ship groaned, a death rattle echoing in the oppressive silence. The last of the Krell soldiers were slumped against the walls, their life signs fading as the siege ship systems died around them. Above them, only the red glare of emergency lighting remained. Zara, despite the agony etched on her face, focused her remaining strength. A low hum emanated from her, a telepathic pulse reaching out into the void. The effort contorted her features, but she held firm. The hum intensified, a beacon cutting through the static of space. Then a flash of emerald green. A Daxamite warship, sleek and powerful, emerged from warp space, its weapons filled. It moved with lethal grace, engaging the remaining Krell ships in a furious ballet of laser fire and explosive ordnance. The siege ship shuddered again, this time from the concussive force of external explosions. Moments later, a boarding party of Daxamite warriors, clad in gleaming armor, stormed into the control room. They moved with practiced efficiency, securing the area and reviving Miller and Zara with specialized medical equipment. Coolant flooded Miller's veins. His lungs burned. He gasped for air, life returning in painful increments. A Daxamite officer, his face grim, approached them. The Krell are routed. The siege ship is secure. He paused, his gaze hardening. The memory plague. It was a Krell bioweapon, designed to erase our history, to destabilize our society from within. Zara stirred, a low growl rumbling in her chest. The daughter, the officer nodded, recovered from the stasis pod, unharmed but suffering from temporary amnesia. She will recover. He turned back to Miller, his expression shifting, becoming contemplative. We recovered the logs, they reveal. The Daxamite-human war. It was a misunderstanding, instigated by a third party, the Krill Collective, seeking to profit from the conflict. He gestured towards the relic in the center of the room, its intricate carvings pulsing with a soft, inner light. This technology, it was intended as a means of peaceful communication, cultural exchange, not as a weapon. Miller stared at the relic, the truth slamming into him with the force of a physical blow. All the lives lost, all the hatred and bloodshed. For nothing, he understood now. The relic wasn't just a piece of alien technology, it was a chance to rewrite history. A flicker of movement caught his eye. A figure emerged from the shadows, the Krell commander, his face twisted in a mask of desperate rage. He lunged towards the relic, a vibroblade glinting in his hand. This ends now. Miller, despite his injuries, reacted instinctively. He tackled the Krell commander, knocking him away from the relic. The two men crashed to the floor, a tangle of limbs and desperation. The Krell commander snarled, raising the vibroblade. You can't stop us, he hissed. Our expansion is inevitable. Miller gripped the Krell's wrist, his strength fueled by a surge of adrenaline. It ends here, he grunted, forcing the blade away. He knew he couldn't win this fight. His body was broken, his strength fading, but he could buy time. Activate the relic, he yelled to Zara. Now. Zara, understanding his intent, focused her will. The relic pulsed brighter, bathing the room in an ethereal glow. A beam of pure energy shot out, piercing the ship's hull and vanishing into the vastness of space. A message of peace, of reconciliation, hurtled towards both Daxamite and human space. The Krell commander, realizing what was happening, redoubled his efforts, trying to break free. Miller held on, his vision blurring. He was failing. Then Zara intervened. She reached out with her mind, connecting Miller to the ship's remaining life support systems. A surge of power flowed through him, bolstering his strength, allowing him to hold on. She then used advanced Daxamite medical technology integrated into her own suit to begin stabilizing his wounds, overriding the Krell's sabotage attempts. The Krell commander, sensing his defeat, screamed in frustration, then went limp. Miller slumped against the wall, exhausted but alive. The relic continued to hum, its message sent. In the days that followed, Miller and Zara were hailed as heroes by both species. Their actions had exposed the Krell's treachery, revealed the truth about the war, and paved the way for a new era of understanding. Peace talks began, treaties were signed, and the scars of the past began to heal. The final scene showed Miller and Zara standing on the bridge of a newly commissioned joint Daxamite human vessel, looking out at the stars. The nebula of the former war zone glowed softly in the distance, a reminder of the past and a symbol of the future. "What now?" Miller asked, his voice hoarse but filled with a newfound hope. Zara turned to him, her eyes shining with warmth. "Now," she said, "we build a lasting peace and perhaps we explore the galaxy together." She paused, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. "There are many more adventures waiting for us, Jake Miller." He smiled back, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "I wouldn't have it any other way."